We are up to Daf Lamed Zayin Amid Aleph, and we are in the middle of the subject of a Madir and a Mudir, where one person made a vow that he will, that the other person, the Mudir, should not have any benefit from him, and yet we said that you're permitted to teach. Certain things you're permitted to teach, and certain things you're not permitted to teach. You're not permitted to teach Chumash, because Chumash you can get paid for, and if you don't charge him, then you are doing him a favor that he just made himself some money, and that's having hana. But other things, teaching medrash and halachas and agadas, which you don't get paid for, because since you don't get paid for, what benefit are you giving him? Teaching is a mitzvah, and there's no money involved, so you're not sparing him any money. There's no hana whatsoever. We tried to understand why mikra should be any different, and we gave an argument between Rav and Rabbi Yechanan, and generally the rules whenever there's an argument Rav and Rabbi Yechanan, halacha is always like Rabbi Yechanan. So Rav said the reason is because you're teaching him, you're actually serving as a babysitter, and it only applies to Chumash because young kids, once they're older, when they're ready to learn Mishnah and beyond, they're much more mature. They don't need this discipline. And Rabbi Yechanan said the reason is because of Pisuk timing, because you're teaching them how to let's say teaching them the vowel, the truck. So now we are up to the Gemara here, Meisaveh. We're asking a question, and we're going to discuss further this Rabbi Yechanan and Rav. Meisvei, about 10 lines from the bottom of the page. Meisvei, have a question. Tanoikus, it says that young kids, like koiden b'tchila b'Shabbos, they should not, when they learn on Shabbos, they should not start a new subject on Shabbos. Eloshainin, you can do chazara on Shabbos, but you don't learn new things on Shabbos. Now we're trying to understand what's the difference, chazara the first time or the second time. So the one that says that the reason is because of that you're only getting paid because you're teaching them the trup and how to read the psukim. Then hainu the enkoyed b'tchil b'Shabbos. You understand? Don't do it the first time because it requires the first time you have to get paid, and you now get paid for work on Shabbos. But the second time they already know it already, so you don't really get paid. Elamandam as chashimis for babysitting makes absolutely no difference the first time and second time. I mean, it has nothing to do with the learning. It has to do with their behavior and keeping them indoors. You don't want them to run about and get hurt and so on and so forth. Why the first time you cannot read B'Shabbos? What's the difference between the first and the second time? That you're not allowed to read the first time, but you're permitted to chazak. What's the difference? Regardless whether they're reviewing it or the first time, you still have to babysit. In fact, it's a lot. They're more settled the first time and second time. Second time they think they know it already. They have no patience to learn. So you need more discipline, not less. So why is it that the second time you finish the first time? So the Gemara goes back and says, so what are you saying? So you want to prove from here that the primary reason why you can get paid for teaching young kids is because of Pesach timing, and that's why it's only the first time and not the second time. The first time you get paid because you taught them something new. The second time you don't really get paid because they know it already. Just reviewing it. Says the Gemara, well, the time. Let me ask you a question. What do you call it? The time, according to you, so you're learning that the reason why you cannot teach the first time on Shabbos is because you're getting paid, and you're not allowed to get paid for services on Shabbos. What do you mean you're not get paid for service on Shabbos? Havlahi. We have a concept, principle called Havlah, and the principle is that you're not allowed to get paid, as we'll see in a minute, specifically for Shabbos. But if you're getting paid for the week, for the month, and Shabbos happens to be included in that, it gets swallowed up, and if it gets swallowed up, it's permitted. So therefore, my question here is: you're telling me you're not allowed to work on, you're not allowed to get paid for teaching for the first time on Shabbos, so therefore you say it makes sense. Why there's a difference first and second time if we're talking about teaching Pesach timing? The time mates Pesach b'Shabbos me also. Why should it be forbidden? If this is the teacher, havloi, this is part of the wage. You get swallowed up, and havlah mishashari, and you're permitted to get paid for service on Shabbos if it's part of the general work. How do I know that? The Tanya. Could be learned in a braise, if somebody hires an employee lishmar es hatinu, to make sure. We learned before, that they used to in Sikturas, they used to raise these children. The women, they used to bring these women on top of a big rock in the shoreline. They wanted to make sure for the paraduma that there's no tumor whatsoever. So they found this big rock. In this rock, there's a gap of a tefach between the rock and below that. So first of all, nobody was buried underneath because the rock was always there. There's no chance that anybody's buried. Plus, it's raised at tefach, so it's like it's an oil. It prevents the oil from any tumor. If the bone rolled in there from going up, because there's a roof and the roof keeps it down. So if it's less than a tefach, then we say the tumor pierces through and goes to Shemaim. So they would hire an employee to watch these kids and make sure that they don't go off the rock, that they remain tired. Or lishma sapara, you can hire people to guard the paradum, and this is 24/7. It's to make sure the entire time. And lishma as Zeraim, when it comes to oimer, to make sure that the Zeraim again are all taken care of and they don't become tamei. Ein noisil Shabbos. It says there you don't pay them for Shabbos. Therefore. Just for the service on Shabbos itself, because he doesn't get paid, and what is he doing as a favor? So what is he classified as? A Shem Mechinim, and a Shem Mechinim is not liable for any shmirah. The only thing a Shem Mechinim is liable for is pshia, negligence, but we already discussed the shit of the Rambam and some other Rishonim, that negligence is not a din of shmirah, negligence is a mazik. The reason why a Shem pays is because negligence, because tantamount to damaging yourself. So there's no laws of shmir at all. So he's not liable at all. But the Shabbos, but if he was rented for the week, Sachar is rented for the month, Sachar Shana rented for the year, Sachar Shua rented for a Shemitah for 7 years. A bit hard because it says in the Gemara you're not allowed to have a contract for more than three years, because then it becomes like an Eved. But anyway, for whatever reason, you work out a deal with it for 7 years to work. Then you can include Shabbos in there as well. And therefore, now he's a Shem Sachar, he gets paid. If he lost it, Shem Sachar is liable for not only Pshia, but also for Geneva and Aveda and so on. There's a Machlekes Achronim on the shit of the Rambam, the Pshia of a Shem Sachar, is that also a mazik or that din of shmir? There are different rules regarding shmir or mazik. So when he says that the pshia is only a mazik, is referring to only limited to Shem Mechinim or all Shemim. Anyway, so the Gemara says, so why is it any better? Why is it any better if he's teaching Pesach time and he's still allowed to permitted to get paid for it? So why should it be different the first time and the second time? Eli, you have to learn Pshat here totally differently. You know what? Nothing to do with getting paid and not getting paid. You know what, Gabi Shabbos, why we don't want you to learn the first time? Heine time. A fascinating reason. We don't want you to start a new share on Shabbos. The different ways of learning Pshat, but the gist of it is you are forcing the parents to turn away from the mitzvah of Shabbos because of their kids. So some Rishonim say parents enjoy playing with the kids on Shabbos. And if they are learning the first time, they are not going to take the kid away because he's going to miss out. And they are going to miss out on their Einik Shabbos. Their Einik Shabbos is to play with the kids. Mishtashaya, which generally means to play with them. But if it's the second time around, the parents don't feel guilty taking the kids out of school and taking them home. That's number one. It's an interesting thing for if you want to go on holidays, when you can take your kids away from school. Second thing is, others say, no, you're waiting at a table, you want each other Shabbos, the whole family together, and you're waiting, but the kids didn't pick up whatever the share was and have to, drill it in again, until finally the kid understands it. And meanwhile, it's harming, or it's having an impact on the Einik Shabbos of the parents, because they're waiting for the kid to come home to eat. That's why we don't want you to have a share on Shabbos, nothing to do with payment or anything else. Now, what's fascinating, one more thing. Before I tell you what's fascinating, another pshat is, you know why on Shabbos you shouldn't have a share the first time? Not because of the parents who are waiting for the kids and you're affecting their Einik Shabbos. It's the kids themselves. On Shabbos, you cannot have an Ian share on Shabbos. Shabbos, you have Chassidus, Fabring, or a Girs of anything, but not an Ian share. And why is that? On Shabbos, you eat far more than you eat during the week. You drink far more than you drink during the week. The Yakir Alein Alma, and the world literally becomes heavy on them. They feel drowsy, lethargic, and they don't have the head to push it learn. Like we all do. You become very sleepy on Shabbos. He says when you change your diet, that's the beginning of sickness. You feel weighted down, you feel heavy. So therefore on Shabbos, it's not a good idea to have a share on something, a pulp or something in the morning and afternoon, because your head is not into it. Now there's an interesting Mordechai. The Mordechai brings a fascinating machlekes. The Gemara takes it up shittas that you cannot get paid for service on Shabbos. How do all the Rabbanim get paid, and how do all the Chazonim get paid on Shabbos and Yom Tov, Baltakeya? So what we say is they're getting paid for the preparation. So it means if a Rav does not prepare his drasha before Shabbos, so Shail Halacha, how he gets paid. The Mordechai brings two opinions. He brings Rabbeinu Baruch and he brings Rabbeinu Shmuel. Rabbeinu Baruch says you're not allowed to get paid for working on Shabbos. Only schar havla. So if you're preparing or whatever, so that's the schar havla. However, he brings Rabbeinu Shmuel. Rabbeinu Shmuel says you're allowed to get paid for work on Shabbos. He says you're allowed to, because the whole issue of getting paid for working on Shabbos is only a drabon. What's he getting paid for working on Shabbos? Because it's like Mekach Memcher. And what's he say Mekach Memcher? Because you might write contracts. It's actually 2 steps away. Quite a weak issue. So Rabbeinu Shmuel says for mitzvah allowed. So the two asks, so how you learn Pshat We're talking about a teacher learning chumash, whatever they're learning, chumash, and we're saying that you can't get paid for Shabbos. So what's he talking about that for mitzvah allowed to? So the Taz gives a brilliant answer. He says there's a difference between what the work you're doing has anything to do with Shabbos. No, Shabbos demands this work, or you happen to be doing a mitzvah because on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday on Shabbos. So about Kodesh, a Rav on Shabbos, or about Tekei on Yom Tov. These are all jobs that relate directly to that day. And therefore, the Chacham didn't make the Issa. You're allowed to get paid, you're doing a mitzvah. But if you're doing other things, teaching your kids, it's not a din in Shabbos. So then, and the first time you could have done it on Friday and to Chazah, so therefore that is that's what you call. You're not going to get paid. You have to learn new things. You can Chazah. So you can you don't have to get paid, and therefore you're not allowed to get paid on Shabbos unless it's Chachablah. Okay. And the Tur is the one who asks on the Rabbeinu Shmuel from this Gemara right now. So the Gemara further. Now, why the argument? Think about it. The one that said the reason is because Pesach time in my time. Why doesn't he say the reason is because babysitting? Because somebody holds. Now, there's 2 Gisayos in the Gemara. This in our Gemara. This is the Gisay. He holds Bonos Mika Boy and Shimur. Our Mishnah says Bonim. Bonim sometimes we translate as sons, and sometimes we translate Bonim as children. If the Mishnah doesn't qualify it, we're going to say it means children. So bonos are included. And the Gemara says girls are generally well behaved. I mean, this Gemara in Nedarim, it's the second time already, the Gemara is very pro women. We had before when it came to the mitzvah of Psachim, who came enthusiastically, came on time to rush to do the mitzvahs, the bonos. The girls were shveilim and the boys and the girls was rizim. Second thing here is, he says when it comes to behaving, they're much more mature. You don't need discipline for girls, for young girls like boys. So boys need shimmer, girls don't need shimmer. And yet the Mishnah says, but you're not allowed to teach anybody. Now, what kind of babysitting is there by girls? So obviously, that's why Rabbi Yechon said, don't do babysitting here, do with teaching. So we see clearly from here that you can teach Chumash to girls. As the Rosh says here, the Rosh says, I'm just calling the Rosh. Maslisin stomach Tani Melamed as Bonav the Mashma Av Bonav B'chai, to teach girls. Basically, in the Dorim, all the Rishonim seem to say to girls. Interesting that none of the Rishonim alert us to the Mishnah in sight. None of them. And here is a pshittas that you can learn that even the Chatchila. Every edition he said that. But there is one other girsa that takes out the word bonus and puts some godel. Because we had a whole discussion before about a godel or a cotton. Our mission, the Pasha is talking about a godel, and there's no babysitting by a godel, yet it says us. I would give an answer before. Suri Mechse doesn't like it. Why would you add words fill in the Mishnah? If you have that girsa in the Gemara, then there's nothing to do with bonus, and bonus Taka can't learn, and that fits into Saitiv. So interesting, only one Rishon brings that girsa, and all the Rishonim the Pshittas say that girls are chayiv and learning just like boys, and Davar Pashat. And the Chatchila, you can do that. Yeah, interesting, yeah. Okay, everyone said the same thing. Okay, let's continue about it. So that's why he doesn't like babysitting. Why don't you learn Pesach timing? Why doesn't Rav say Pesach timing? He's mother, well, the man doesn't have my time Pesach timing. So he holds Pesach timing that I sue. He holds a Pesach timing is from the Torah. It's not, and therefore from the Torah, Ma ani bechinim. Moshe Rabbeinu said, I was told to teach you Ma ani bechinim. I'm not getting paid because he was rich, or like the answer Tziva Hashem instructed. What did he tell me to get paid? Obviously, Hashem gave him instructions not to get paid, and therefore, I'll get paid for Pesach timing. So what are you getting paid for? It must be babysitting. What's going on in Pesach timing from the Torah now? Now, Pesach piece of time is what Torah or not. Rabbi Magic see, there's a pasuk. Ezra saying to Edom when they all came back from Babel, and he's giving them, it's a fascinating thing there in Nehemiah, talking about the Yom Tevim, what all the Yom Tevim are, and so on and so forth. If you have a chance to learn that whole entire page Ches in Nehemiah, where the people had no idea what Rosh Hashanah is, had no idea, and so Yom Kippur is, had no idea what Sukkot is, and then Ezra has to tell them in 2 sentences what's Rosh Hashanah. You would think Rosh Hashanah is Yom Adin. That's what we're told. Nothing. He says, go party, be happy. You're not allowed to cry. I mean, you have to see this. And the Vilna Gaon says you have to cry. And all the Acharim, they have a whole discussion. How can you cry in Rosh Hashanah? Ezra told them not to cry in Rosh Hashanah. So they, so if they want to learn, you're not allowed to cry during the day, but during davening, you're supposed to cry. And anyhow, so just fascinating. And what he says in Kippur, he said Sukkot. So says over there, they read in the Sefer Torah Lakim. The Feidish, it's explained. The Soim Sechel is given some understanding. The Yavinu b'Mikra. What in the world are these 3 things here that he told them? I mean, I should be able to understand the Torah. So this is what we touch. This is what Rabbi Charanel says. Vayikoru b'Sefer Torah Lakim Zeh Mikra. Mid Feidish, he explained it. It's a Targum. Now, there's a big machlek. The Targum means literally Targum Unkelus. Because in the beginning of the Gemara Megillah, we say that Unkelus learned from Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua, that was his teachers. Really was taught in Sinai. It was forgotten. Ezra taught it was forgotten. Keep on me forgotten. Ezra taught it was forgotten. And then Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua taught it to Unkelus, and he put it out there. So this is the Targum that we have is from Halach Mersin. But that's pshat. It's very hard then to see how Rashi and all of those continue arguing like you finish a Targum. If that's the way Moshe Rabbeinu told us, what does it mean? So it's not like others say Targum is literally, it says in the Torah, Moshe Bayras at Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu translated Torah in so many languages. So he gave them a translation, whatever language it was, in Babylonian, because they just came from, maybe who says Dafka Targum Uncles. Okay, the next thing was V'soim Sechel Elo Hapsukim, where the pasuk ends. That was from him. The Yavinu b'Mikra, he gave them understand Mikra. When we get to understand Mikra, is a pisuk timing. That is trup, because the trup tells you a Zakiv Katan puts the words together, a Zakiv Katan puts the words together, and a Snachta tells you this is where this. We have a few, Rashi Chumash in the Gemara, we had a few times that there are words in the pasuk that you can read it either way, but the trup gives us an understanding. But those who hold that pisuk timing is not from the Torah, they learn Elah HaMeseides, the Chasav Yatim, more letters and less letters, that all comes from there. You notice it does not say here the kapitlach in the Torah, the prokim in the Torah, and so on and so forth, or sheini shlishi, because that, as we know, is not even Jewish. It came from the Catholics, and one of the main reasons why they did it is to be able to debate with the Yidden, so they should use as references. So the Minchas Elazar says, you paskas the Chulis, you're not allowed to stop at sheini shlishi the way it's in Chumash. You're not allowed to, because the seichel chukasem. Yeah, and in fact, it doesn't even make sense. You go through most parshas where it stops Sheni Shlishi, 3 psukim further ends the Indian. Everyone did whatever they wanted. There's no rules. Yeah, but it's a long time ago. Times on a boundary, they were having debates. But I'm saying it's interesting. Minchas Elazar, which I don't think anybody keeps, but Minchas Elazar says, maybe the Munkat should do, I don't know. Minchas Elazar writes, you're not allowed to stop anywhere it says by Sheni Shlishi, unless we're stopping because it makes sense. And very few places actually make sense. Just look at it. Yeah, next time you look at any pasha, maybe it would make sense. I mean, I don't know what he did in the show, but I'm assuming we actually had in Caracas a person in the community very close to us. He was a Munkacha Chassid. He's a Munkacha Chassid. And he said fascinating things. But I don't know. I never had thought of it, or I didn't know about it at the time to ask him. But see clearly from here, that's not included. Well, Ezra tells them all the basics of how to learn Torah, and doesn't say anything about Sheni Shlishi and all that, or the Prakim. Right? Said talking about Chumashim. The Gemara in Kedushin says that the Seifrim, they used to count the Psukim, they used to count the words. That's why they're called Seifrim. They counted. Mikra Seifrim, the words of the Seifrim. And there's a Masada where they wrote everything down, and the Ita Sefer, we'll see in a minute, the crowning of the Sefer. I mean, sometimes the Torah has extra words that are necessary, but they did it to be poetic, or they did it to make it a nicer language. And we'll see in a minute what Mikra Sefer is. Like sometimes you have words in Tanakh that are there, that we read it, but it's not there. Or ksiva v'lekayin. Sometimes we have words that are written, but we skip it when we read it. Halachal Moshe, they all come Moshe Messinai. Mikra Seifim, we give a few examples. Mikra Seifim, the way we read it. How do we know how to read words? Edits. Should be edits or oretz, depending if it's the end of a pasuk, it becomes a comment. If it's the middle of a pasuk. Interesting, we do have oretz fardit. What happens to that rule? There's a sefer called, I forgot what it's called, Angitten. It was Get Makusha. So he has this whole theory that nobody has the right alibis today. Nobody. So he brings that ayah. For example, a Krishma in Brachas, when it says, when you read Krishma, you have to be very careful and articulate the words so you shouldn't connect. So what are the words that the Gemara says? Hakonof psil. What's the problem there? This is a fei, this is a pay. Clearly, in those days, no such thing as a fei and a pay. Asev bisotcha. What's the problem there? Clearly, there's no vase and base. So when did that happen? We Ashkenaz have a Milo with Sfard because we have a chilvi, a tough and a soft, a komets and a patach. They have Milos because they're chat of Pasach and Pasach are different from each other. The Gimel, there has a dat and not a dat. All those things we don't do right. And Taman sort of mixes both. I think supposed to they say that Havaris Taman is supposed to be the best, closest to authentic alibis. But here, for example, clearly there's a difference of komets and a patach. That's what it is. If you're Havaris Fadid, what is the difference in that? You always say, you never say komets. Or Shamayim Mitzrim. How do you know if it's not Shamim or Mitzrim? There's a hidden aleph there. It's as if Shamayim, Mitzrayim. That's from the Mikra. That's Mikra Seifrim. That's what we're taught. Handed down. Ito Seifrim is a word that doesn't have to be. Avraham Avinu says, Achat Tabayro. Afterwards you leave. Word that Achat doesn't have to say, just like leave. Or he could have said, Achat Telech. Afterwards, they say, Rivka, you can leave. Or Achat to Asev. Moshe Rabbeinu will pass away after Milchemes Midian. Say the word Achat. Or Kid Mosharim Achat Nagainim. That the singers came first and then came the music players. They don't say the word Achat because they Kid Mosharim Nagainim or something. Or Tzikoscha Ki Haradekel. That the Malachim, the Haradekel, need Yitzitkas as well. When we kill, you don't say kill, you just say Haradekel. That these are examples of words that iter, just to make it nicer. Karim even written, read but not written. For example, Pros the Belechta. In this pasuk it says Nahar Pros, that the David Melech crossed the river, and it says in the pasuk over there we read Pros even though it's not written. Or Ish the Kasha Yishal Ish Bedvar Alekim. That Achi Teifel was so smart that people would come and ask him questions, and they would say it says there the word Ish that people would ask Hashem. In the pasuk it doesn't say the word Ish. Or Bayim the Nivus. So Yirmiyah says that we're going to come the Hinyam Bayim. When Hashem will rebuild the city, the word Bayim is not written. Or Allah de Plata. Or again, when Yirmiyah says over there something that all those who flee, the refugees, and it says the law, which is not written there. Or Esther, the Hugad that Boya says that I was told everything that you did for your mother-in-law, the word S is not written. Or Eli the Hagoyim, there as well. Ruth says to Naomi, everything I was told, Eli, no Eli in the pasuk. Or Eli the Hasoidim, again Rus. Most of them are Rus. Again, that he told me about the barley, there's no Eli there. Halan, these are Karyan, we read them, but Velay Kosvam were not written. Kosvam Velay Karyan, written but not read, it's not there. We don't read it all. Is for example, no the Yislach. That it says there that Naaman says, "Please forgive me," told Elisha. "Please forgive me that I have to go to the base of Beit Zara with my king there, and I crouch down so he can lean on me. I'm not worshiping the Beit Zara, but I have to crouch down because he's leaning on me. So please forgive me." So that no for the Yislach is written, but we don't read it. Or Zeis of Hamitzah. This is the mitzvah that Hashem said. The Zeis is written, but not what do you call it? Is written, but we don't read it. Yidrech the Hadoirech. It talks about the Yirmiyah talks about all those archers. Said the word Yidrech, we don't read it. Or Chomesh the past Negev. Cheskel is describing the base of Midrash. It says each time it was 4,500. One of the times it says twice Chomesh, you won't read it. Or Im the Chigoyo, or the word Im from if again from Rus. If he doesn't, the Bayas is saying about Ish Pleni Almighty. Im again, it's written, but we don't read it. Now the Ran says, and Tosfos says even more, that some of these things are not in our Torah. The taste of the top flight taste is there. Zeis the Hamitzah, Pashas Chanan, the Eina Kach B'Shum Chumash. We don't have that now, Chumash. And the Ran says in a few things there as well. The Gilyan Hashas, and I can't remember for the life of me where the Gilyan Kivega collects all the psukim. We have tasted a few times. That's not now psukim. Interesting. All of this is in Tanakh, not in the Torah. It's all Nach, and it's Halacha Moshe Sinai. So Halacha. Let's start off saying it. All this is Halacha Moshe Sinai. So interesting how exactly it worked. Halacha Moshe. The Vaz explains it. I don't remember what he says. How Halacha Moshe Sinai worked in Tanakh. What exactly mean? All the words are already written before, and how's it work? But there's a fascinating radak, a scary radak. Because we say that the entire Torah, everything is the way it is in the Seder Moshe Sinai. But Radak says, now, if you just learn the Gemara, if you have any problems, at worst, it's only Nach. The Torah itself, everything, the Chassav. The Gemara says that we're not bucking the Chassidus via Torah. That's why the Shagas Ayi said there's no mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah today, because we don't know what's Chassav, Yatzah, maybe not even Yatzah mitzvah. But Radak writes in Shmuel, he writes a scary thing. He says that when the Eden went out of after the Beis Hamikdash, they lost the Torah. And the people who were bucking the Torah all died out. The Anshe Knesset Gdola, when they went back to Israel, collected all the Sifrei Torahs, and they saw there were so many nuschais in the Torah. He talks about Torah now. That's so scary. So many nuschais. So they decided they're going to follow a majority. Like the Rambam writes in the Rambam, that there's a Sefer Torah that everybody used to use as a reference. So they follow the majority. And after they follow the majority, but what about those places that they couldn't follow? There's no majority, like evenly argued which is the way to do it. Those they decided either kriva like ksiva, ksiva like kriva. All this in the Gemara here. What do you mean they write it and we don't read it, or they read it and we don't write it? So if the mamash didn't know what to do, they would put it in just maybe, but we don't read it because maybe it's wrong. And those we read, we don't write it's a little bit of right, but not strong enough of a right. So we'll put it in, but we're not going to write it in because scary thoughts.
Now later on in your work, probably there's things from like creates it.
We do, in fact, yes, we do learn things from it. So it's all for a reason. But fascinating Rosh, and you see clearly the Rosh is alerting us to Kabbalah. The Rosh says over here, I can't remember the Rosh is. The Rosh says, the Rosh is Su. It's clear the Rosh is learning to Kabbalah. Let's go quickly a little further. Says the Gemara. Talking about the Torah, the Marava, and Etisro, Shokin Lahadib Sukkim, the plus of Sukkim. The following pasuk is divided into 3 psukim, even though in our Torah it's all one pasuk. And it says over here, that a long pasuk there, they divided into 3 psukim. Okay. How did Moshe become wealthy? From the luchas. Shneimar said, you should destroy for yourself luchas like the first ones. What do you mean, lecha to you? You keep the sapphires, you keep the stone, and became rich. The Torah was actually given to Moshe Ulazare and to his descendants. Shneimar says, just like we just stashed that the remnants of the luchas went to Moshe. Also, the writing of the luchas goes to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Nog Batoivas Ein, he was being generous of spirit. The Nisan of Israel, he decided to give us the Torah. That's why we say in Shmoneh Yismach Moshe b'matnas chelkai. It's his chelik. It says clearly, it's his chelik. All because but Gemara is not going to be happy with that. So then, what does it mean? Davening say Moshe b'matnas chelkai. What are you telling me that the Torah was given to Moshe and he did us a favor and gave it to us, shared it with us? Says the Vedic Pasuk, but Hashem commanded, we had this a few days ago, instruct us to teach you guys. And he told me, so my answers, no, he instructed me the mitzvahs for me and the Torah. But I decided to give it to you as well. He didn't tell me to give it to you. I'm bringing another pasuk. It says the pasuk, so see, I taught you the chukim mishpatim that Hashem told me. So Hashem told me to give it to you. No. Again, one answers, he told it to me, but I decided to give it to you. Says the Gemara, and says in there, now write this shira. So it says clearly lachem, not just for you, but for everybody. This is for Klal Yisrael. So he says, Hashira Luchuda. Only the song is the only part that's for Klal Yisrael, but the rest of the Torah is for Moshe. So the Gemara says, what are you talking about? It says in the Pasuk, this will be an aid for Klal Yisrael. If they misbehave, then they're going to get all this punishment. And you're telling me that only the song is no punishment. Very important. I'll get back to in a minute. Ela Pulpula Ba'alma. What Moshe Rabbeinu was given was the ability to fathom the Torah itself. The Torah is cryptic. The Torah is nebulous sometimes, and Moshe Rabbeinu is given the tools to understand it, and that was his personally, and he gave it to us. As all the Rishonim say, the union of Chidud Shap is something else. But the Rosh says on this, I should read you the Rosh. Pulpula Ba'alma. So he says here, Havana v'charifus, understanding a sharpness. You're writing. What did Moshe Rabbeinu receive? The ability to understand the Torah in depth. Where do you find the whole Chochmah Seichel and Torah? Remuzim b'ksav haTorah b'tzura sa'osis. That's Kabbalah. That the shape of the letters, Abakiva Dashin from the Tagin of the Thousand Halachos, the shape of the letters is identifies the pshat and everything here, which is pretty amazing. There's a famous Shagas Ayin that's in Shuvah Lamadal, talks about the mitzvah Ksivas of Torah. So the way we normally learn Ksivas Torah is a mitzvah to write the whole Torah. The Rambam comes along, way we understand the Rambam. The mitzvah was to write only Hazim, not the whole Torah. But because you're not allowed to write Parshiyas, so we have no choice but to write the whole Torah. So the whole Torah writing is an adjunct to Hazim. And the question is, the Gemara clearly, so the Shagas Ari asked, and the Rambam, right here the Gemara says clearly, you look at Taisus on the Rosh, because the Pasuk says that this Shira will be aid for the Klal Yisrael, is a raya, as Taisus says, that the mitzvah is to write the whole Torah, that the whole Torah was given to us. That Shira means Torah. Shira doesn't mean Hazinu, it means the whole Torah. So the Shagas Ari asked, what's Pshat in the Rambam then? How is the Rambam going to learn the Gemara here? Doesn't really answer, but that's the yes the number. Because the Pasuk, the mitzvah is to write the shira. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow, Mitzvah. Have a good day, everybody.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, see you.